You have always felt it. A quiet unease, a gnawing sensation, a whisper at the back of your mind telling you that the world you inhabit is somehow misaligned with the rhythm of your own nature. It is not a loud feeling, not something you can always articulate, but it is persistent. Like walking into a room where the furniture has been slightly rearranged. Nothing overtly wrong, yet your body knows instinctively that something is off. You move through social gatherings, workplaces, family dinners, and notice that everyone else seems to be following a script you were never given. They laugh at the right cues, nod at the predictable moments, smile as if on command. To you, their interactions often feel rehearsed, their lives like carefully staged theater. And you stand there, the uninvited audience member, watching a performance that was never meant to fool you. Most people will tell you that this feeling is a problem. They will say you are anxious, too sensitive, too analytical. You may have even convinced yourself that something is broken inside you. But what if that is not the truth? What if the very discomfort that isolates you is evidence of a rare form of perception? One that Carl Jung studied, one that psychology often overlooks because it is too disruptive, too destabilizing for the world to easily accept? Jung called it a dangerous perception, a way of seeing that does not just register appearances, but penetrates into the hidden architecture beneath them. For the majority, this kind of vision is unbearable. But for a select few, it is simply their natural state. This dangerous perception is not a choice. You did not ask for it, you cannot switch it off, and you cannot dull it without dulling yourself. It operates constantly, filtering every interaction, every micro-expression, every emotional current in the atmosphere. To you, words are never just words. You notice the tension in a jaw that betrays suppressed anger, the faint hesitation before someone agrees that reveals their doubt, the way a smile flickers too quickly to mask envy. While others hear conversation, you hear contradiction. While they enjoy the story on the surface, you feel the story underneath. It is not merely observation. It is immersion. You see through people, and that terrifies them. This is the first sign of the rare personality type Jung identified. You process reality at a depth that would psychologically fracture most people. You are not looking at masks, you are looking through them. Every interaction becomes a double exposure. The persona someone is projecting, and the shadow they are desperately hiding. Jung believed that the human psyche is split between the conscious mask we wear for society and the unconscious contents we repress. Most people live comfortably enough in this arrangement. They play their roles and keep their shadows buried. But you are the mirror they did not ask for. Your perception reflects back what they cannot face in themselves. This is why you often feel tension in rooms, without understanding why. It is why certain people recoil from you, why others label you as too intense or hard to be around. It is not that you are doing something wrong, it is that your presence unsettles them, not because of who you are, but because of what you unconsciously reveal. Imagine a life carefully built around avoidance. Avoidance of pain, avoidance of truth, avoidance of buried desires. Then imagine someone walking in who sees the cracks in that structure instantly. You do not have to say a word. Your very existence becomes a silent confrontation. Why are you still pretending? But here lies the cruel irony. Because you see so deeply, because you sense the falseness of so many interactions, you begin to feel isolated. Conversations that others find fulfilling leave you hollow. Gatherings that energize others leave you drained. It is not arrogance, it is starvation. And this starvation leads us directly to the second sign of the rare type. You are allergic to superficiality. Think of how small talk feels in your body. Someone asks about the weather, and you feel your energy collapse. A colleague gossips about trivial workplace politics, and you struggle not to recoil. Friends chat endlessly about weekend plans, possessions, shallow victories, and you feel more alone in that group than you would if you were physically by yourself. This is not because you think you are above them. It is because superficial interaction does not feed the hunger that drives your psyche. For you, words must cut deeper than convenience. They must point towards something real. You crave the kind of conversations where masks fall off by necessity, where the hidden becomes visible, where truth replaces performance. Anything less is not only boring, it is suffocating. Jung understood this state of being. He noted that certain individuals live in a condition of what he called existential tension. They cannot fully participate in the collective unconscious, the shared web of illusions and stories that hold societies together. But they cannot escape it either. They are awake in a world that prefers sleep. They are human enough to need connection, yet too awake to be satisfied by the connections most people offer. This double bind explains why you often feel both desperate for closeness and repelled by the forms of closeness available to you. It explains why loneliness can be more acute in groups than in solitude, and why solitude, though painful, sometimes feels like the only place you can breathe. The second sign is not only about your dislike of small talk, it is about your psychological metabolism. Superficial interaction drains you because it requires you to betray yourself. It asks you to pretend that the surface is enough when you know it never is. Over time, this betrayal accumulates as fatigue, anxiety, even depression. You may wonder why casual friendships never seem to last, why relationships dissolve when you push for more honesty, why you cannot hold interest in environments that others find stimulating. The truth is simple but painful. Your system rejects what most people crave. They want comfort, you need truth. They want validation, you need transformation. They want entertainment, you need meaning. This is why, in your life, you have likely lost connections not through conflict, but through collapse. The more you refuse to play along, the more others withdraw. They sense that with you, masks are impossible. They cannot perform, and performance is their lifeline. So they leave. And though you know on some level this is inevitable, it still hurts. It reinforces the illusion that you are somehow broken, that you are unfit for the world. But you are not unfit. You are simply attuned to a frequency that most cannot hear without shattering. Yet there is an even darker truth behind this. Because your system is so sensitive, you do not merely notice what others hide, you begin to absorb it. You carry not only your own psychological burdens, but theirs as well. Jung called this phenomenon participation mystique, the merging of boundaries between the individual and the collective unconscious. For most people, this happens only in rare states, perhaps in rituals or moments of extreme emotion. For you, it happens constantly. And that brings us to the edge of the third sign, where we step into even heavier territory. The experience of living as an emotional sponge, an involuntary alchemist who transmutes the unspoken grief, rage, and despair of everyone around you. But before we descend into that darker terrain, pause for a moment. Reflect on what has already been uncovered. The first sign reveals your dangerous perception, your ability to see through masks rather than be fooled by them. The second sign exposes your allergy to superficiality, the reason ordinary connections starve rather than sustain you. These two together already explain much of your exhaustion, your sense of alienation, your inability to participate in the collective delusion most call life. If you recognize yourself here, understand this. You are not failing to adapt. You are perceiving too clearly. You are not broken. You are rare. And yet, the path of the rare is never simple. In the next movement, we will confront the third sign and beyond. The psychological weight of absorption, the fragmentation of the self, the recognition of your kind, and the transformation of wounds into power. These are not easy truths, but they are necessary ones. For once you see them, you cannot return to the illusion of ordinariness. You cannot unsee the truth of who you are. And perhaps, despite the cost, you would not want to. If the first sign is dangerous perception and the second is the allergy to superficiality, then the third is something far heavier, a burden that most people will never carry, and perhaps could not carry without collapsing. You have likely noticed it in yourself countless times, though you may not have had a word for it. You walk into a room where no one speaks, and yet you feel tension crawl across your skin. You sit across from someone smiling, but you sense a heaviness pressing against your chest that does not belong to you. You leave gatherings exhausted without understanding why, only to realize later that you were not drained by your own emotions, but by everyone else's. This is the experience of living as an absorber of unspoken currents, what Jung might have called participation mystique in its most relentless form. The third sign of the rare type is this: you are an emotional sponge, a collector of psychic residue. Where others only register surface moods, you internalize the shadows of those around you. Their repressed anger seeps into your body. Their grief bleeds into your mind. Their fear echoes in your nervous system as if it were your own. At first, you may believe you are simply sensitive, perhaps too empathetic, perhaps fragile. But this is not fragility. This is a form of perception so raw that it overrides boundaries. Your psyche is porous, and the unconscious of others leaks into you whether you wish it to or not. This phenomenon is deeply misunderstood. The culture romanticizes empathy, painting it as a virtue, as if to feel the emotions of others were always a gift. But for those who truly experience it, the reality is far darker. Imagine carrying your own grief, your own disappointments, your own questions, and then waking each day to find your body carrying dozens more that do not belong to you. Imagine mistaking these alien feelings for your own, believing you are anxious, when in fact the anxiety comes from the person sitting next to you. Believing you are angry, when in fact you are absorbing the quiet rage of someone you barely know. Over time, this erosion of boundaries does not only drain you, it destabilizes your sense of self. Jung spoke often of the necessity of individuation, the process by which a person differentiates themselves from the collective unconscious. Most people achieve this partially, carving out identities strong enough to function in society, but weak enough to keep them bound to the collective. But for you, individuation becomes a battlefield. Because you are constantly absorbing the psychic debris of others, your boundaries blur, your inner world becomes crowded, and you find it increasingly difficult to distinguish what is authentically yours from what has been borrowed or imposed. You may find yourself feeling guilt without cause, despair without story, rage without trigger. And in your confusion, you may ask, who am I really beneath all these intrusions? This question leads directly to the fourth sign, the fragmentation of self. For rare types like you, life often feels like a hall of mirrors. At times, you are yourself, sharp and clear. At other times, you feel overtaken, possessed by moods and energies that do not belong to you. One day, you are decisive. The next, you cannot find your voice. One moment, you crave solitude. The next, you drown in it. It is not inconsistency. It is infiltration. Every fragment of unacknowledged energy that you absorb finds a place in your psyche, like ghosts taking up residence in a house that was never meant for them. Jung warned of this danger. He observed that when the unconscious contents of others are projected onto you, you become a vessel for their shadow. And unless you learn to recognize and separate these shadows, you risk mistaking them for yourself. This is why you may sometimes feel alien to your own life, as though you are acting out roles written by unseen forces. It explains why your moods can swing violently, why clarity slips through your hands, why a simple interaction can leave you disoriented for days. You are not unstable. You are fragmented. And fragmentation is the natural result of carrying more than one psyche within your own. But fragmentation also has a darker consequence. Isolation deepens. When you cannot fully trust your own emotional state, how can you expect others to understand it? When you sense energies that no one else acknowledges, how can you speak of them without sounding irrational? You begin to retreat. You begin to keep secrets, not because you wish to deceive, but because you know others cannot comprehend the truth of your perception. And in this secrecy, the loneliness grows sharper. You become both hyperconnected and disconnected, flooded by the emotions of others, yet unable to share your own. And here, at this depth of alienation, the fifth sign emerges: the recognition of your own kind. Rare as it is, there are others who live as you do, others whose perception cuts too deep, whose psyches are too porous, whose souls carry burdens not their own. When you encounter them, something unspoken passes between you. A look, a silence, a subtle recognition. You see as I see. This recognition is not always pleasant. In fact, it can be deeply unsettling, because to meet another like you is to have your own condition mirrored back. It strips away the illusion that perhaps you are just different. Perhaps you are exaggerating. Perhaps you are imagining things. In their presence, you feel the truth confirmed. You are not imagining anything. You are rare, and you are not alone. But even in recognition, there is danger. When two such rare types meet, the connection can either be transcendent or catastrophic. It can produce bonds of profound depth, where words become unnecessary, where silence itself becomes a language. Or it can collapse into mutual destruction, as both psyches absorb and reflect the shadows of the other, until neither can bear the weight. Jung warned of this as well, noting that when two unconscious forces collide without awareness, the result is often chaos. And so, even the recognition of your kind is not a guaranteed refuge. It is a mirror that can heal or shatter, depending on the strength of your boundaries and the clarity of your self-awareness. To summarize this second movement, the third sign reveals your role as an absorber of psychic debris. The fourth exposes the fragmentation this produces within you. The fifth acknowledges the rare recognition of others like you, a recognition that is both a gift and a threat. Together, these signs describe a life not of ease, but of constant negotiation. A life spent distinguishing between what is yours and what is not, between self and other, between clarity and intrusion. And yet, these burdens are not the end of the story. They are the crucible from which something even rarer can emerge. For if you can survive the absorption, the fragmentation, the isolation, and the recognition, you will encounter the final transformation. This is where wounds turn to wisdom, where the unbearable becomes power, where the very traits that isolate you become the source of your strength. But that belongs to the final section. And before we descend into that last stage, you must pause and recognize this. You are not fragile. You are not broken. You are carrying what others refuse to carry, and that alone makes your survival a quiet act of defiance. By the time you reach this stage, the world has already made its judgment of you. You are too sensitive, too complicated, too serious, too much. These labels accumulate not because they are true, but because they serve as society's defense mechanism against what it cannot integrate. When people cannot control you, they reduce you. When they cannot silence you, they dismiss you. And so you walk through life half believing that perhaps you are a mistake, an error of nature, someone designed to feel too much in a world engineered for numbness. But hidden inside this very wound lies the sixth sign of the rare type: the capacity to transform pain into power. This transformation does not begin as a choice. At first, it is pure survival. You endure years of carrying what is not yours, years of fragmentation, years of loneliness. You bend under the weight of shadows, nearly breaking, perhaps more than once. But in this breaking, something peculiar happens. You begin to notice patterns. You begin to see that the emotions flooding through you are not random, but archetypal. Grief takes on the shape of every grief. Rage echoes with a universal tone. Despair repeats itself across faces and voices, until you realize it is never just one person's pain you are holding. It is the collective. You are living proof of what Jung insisted, that beneath the individual psyche lies the collective unconscious, and it speaks through you with relentless force. Here is the danger and the gift. If you fail to recognize the collective nature of what you carry, you drown. You spend your life mistaking the world's shadows for your own. You live haunted, fragmented, guilty without cause, angry without reason. But if you succeed, if you learn to separate what is yours from what is not, if you develop the ruthless clarity to name what belongs to you and return what does not, then your wound becomes something else. It becomes alchemy. You begin to transmute raw psychic material into insight, into language, into art, into vision. You become what Jung called a mediator of the unconscious, someone who gives form to what others cannot face. This is why the rare type often becomes a creator, a thinker, an observer whose work unsettles and illuminates in equal measure. The art they produce, the words they write, the ideas they shape. These are not hobbies. They are survival strategies. They are how the unbearable becomes bearable. They are how chaos is ordered, how shadows are named, how suffering is not wasted, but transformed. Every poem that pierces, every painting that disturbs, every philosophy that shakes foundations. Behind them, you will often find a person like you, someone whose nervous system was too porous to ignore the collective, someone who turned private torment into universal resonance. This is the sixth sign. Your wound refuses to remain only yours. It becomes a doorway. Through it, you translate the unconscious into something the world can finally see. It is not an easy gift. It demands solitude, discipline, and often a lifelong confrontation with pain. But it is a gift nonetheless. And if you do not recognize it, you may live your whole life believing you are cursed, when in fact you are carrying the very tool that could have set you free. But there is one final sign, and it is the most dangerous of all. Once you have endured perception, rejection, absorption, fragmentation, recognition, and transformation, you emerge different, not better, not healed in the simplistic sense, but altered in a way that others can feel instantly. This is the seventh sign. Your very presence becomes unsettling. You do not need to speak. You do not need to reveal your insights. You do not need to expose anyone. And yet, people sense it. They sense the depth in your gaze, the silence in your pauses, the weight in your existence. They sense that with you, illusions cannot hold. And so, they react. Some are drawn to you, magnetized by the intensity they cannot explain. They find in you a strange liberation, as if standing near you allows them to drop masks they did not even know they were wearing. Others recoil. They feel judged without being judged, seen without permission, stripped without touch. You become, in Jungian terms, a figure of the shadow, not because you embody darkness, but because your presence activates the darkness in others. They project onto you everything they refuse to face. To some, you are inspiring. To others, you are intolerable. And so, your life takes on a paradoxical quality. You are both sought after and avoided, both celebrated and condemned. You may find yourself at the center of admiration you never asked for, or at the edge of rejection you did not deserve. This polarity is not about you personally. It is about what you represent. You have become a psychological disruptor, a living reminder that the world people construct for themselves is fragile, and that beneath it lies something much larger, much darker, and much more real. This seventh sign is perhaps the hardest to bear, because it ensures you will never fully belong. You may find pockets of resonance, rare connections, moments of profound intimacy with those who can meet you where you are. But the collective, the majority, will always keep you at a distance. They must. To accept you fully would mean to accept the parts of themselves they have spent their lives denying, and most will never do that. But here lies the final inversion. What once felt like curse becomes clarity. You stop expecting belonging from those who cannot give it. You stop demanding understanding from those who are terrified of it. You stop apologizing for the weight you carry. Instead, you begin to use it. You begin to wield the very perception that once isolated you as a tool of precision. You learn when to speak and when to remain silent, when to reveal and when to withhold, when to confront and when to let the mask remain. You move through the world not as someone seeking acceptance, but as someone aware of the quiet power of their presence. This is the rarest transformation of all. To carry the wound without being crushed by it. To wield perception without being destroyed by it. To live not as a victim of your difference, but as a strategist of it. Jung warned that the path of individuation is not for everyone. Most people will never walk it. But for those who must, there is no alternative. You are one of those few. And so, we arrive at the end of this map. 7 signs, woven from Jung's insights, and the psychological realities that most people refuse to face. Perception too deep to be comfortable, a starvation for truth, absorption of others' shadows, fragmentation of self, recognition of your kind, the alchemy of the wound, and finally, the unsettling presence that cannot be ignored. Together, they describe not a weakness, but a rare structure of being, a structure both cursed and gifted, dangerous and indispensable. If you recognize yourself in these signs, understand this. Your life will never be easy, but it can be profound. You will never be ordinary, but you can be real. And in a world drowning in illusion, reality itself is the most dangerous force of all. So here you are, at the end of this journey, staring into the mirror you've been avoiding your whole life. And maybe, for the first time, you don't see a flaw. You don't see someone broken, someone cursed, someone who needs to be fixed. You see what Jung saw. You see a rare personality type, born with perception that cuts through illusion, a nervous system that absorbs what others deny, a depth that starves in the shallow waters most people are content to drown in. You see the truth. You were never meant to blend in. You were meant to disturb. Disturbing is not an insult. It is the highest compliment the unconscious can pay to a conscious mind. It means your existence unsettles lies. Your presence fractures illusions. Your eyes remind others of what they've spent a lifetime suppressing. And if they call you too much, too sensitive, too complicated, let them. Because what they are really saying is this: you make it impossible for me to keep pretending. The real danger was never your intensity. It was your silence. The years you spent dimming your light, softening your edges, starving your own truth just to be palatable. That silence was betrayal, not just of yourself, but of everyone who needed someone like you to speak first, to show that it was possible, to prove that being different is not disease, it is destiny. Now you know why the world treated you the way it did. Now you know why exhaustion followed you, why people pulled away, why loneliness never left your side. It was not punishment, it was initiation. You were being shaped, tested, carved down to the core so that what remained could not be broken. Every rejection trained you. Every mask you refused to wear freed you. Every wound you endured sharpened you into someone the world cannot ignore. But recognition is only the beginning. Transformation requires action. You can leave this knowledge here in the safety of theory, or you can use it. You can stop diluting your intensity. Stop apologizing for your perception. Stop begging for acceptance from those who will never be able to give it. You can decide, right here, that your rare frequency is no longer a burden you carry in silence, but a signal you broadcast without shame. And when you do, you will find others. Rare recognizes rare. They may be scattered, they may be few, but they exist. And when you connect, everything changes. The loneliness evaporates, the exhaustion lessens, the hunger is fed. Together, rare types do not just survive, they rewire the collective. They plant seeds of truth in a soil that has been barren for centuries. They become living proof that another way of being is possible. This is your invitation. Not to be healed, not to be fixed, not to be normal, but to be exactly what you are, in full, without apology. The world does not need more conformity. It does not need more numbness. It needs exactly what you've been taught to hide: your perception, your depth, your wound, your intensity. That is your contribution. That is your gift. That is your weapon. So ask yourself, are you willing to carry it in the open? Are you willing to let the world call you too much, too intense, too sensitive? And smile, knowing they are confessing their own fear? Are you willing to stop betraying the very thing that makes you rare? Because if you are, then this moment is not an ending. It is a beginning. Welcome to your real life. Welcome to the frequency that few will ever understand, but the right ones will never forget. And if you're ready to take this further, you know what to do. Stay close, because from here on, we go even deeper.